beautiful people. Welcome to the very first episode of the Take a Sip podcast. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to finally have the very first episode out. I wanted to give you guys a full intro of who I am and I guess what makes me qualified to be here and sit in front of you guys and share my perspectives with you guys. I didn't want to forget anything, so I wrote a script so that I can kind of hit every point. Like, I don't want to miss anything. I want you guys to know all the roads that led to here. But before I get into the script, I want to share with you guys a little story to kind of break the ice. If you guys didn't know me or don't know anything about me, this is your first time coming across my content, my channel. I am on social media. I am a TikToker. I am on IG. I'm on Instagram. I'm somewhat of, I would say, maybe a micro influencer on IG and maybe a little bit bigger of an influencer on TikTok. My platform's a lot bigger on TikTok. And I've been on YouTube for a couple years now as well, starting with business content and then rolling over into more lifestyle and personal content. So some of you guys may or may not be new here, but I wanted to share a little tidbit about me before we get started, and just so you kind of get to know my little personality a little bit more. So if you guys are new here, my father passed January of 2021. And I have never, besides one time, dreamt my father. And I had another dream of him last night. And I wanted to share that because I felt like today is such an important day. And the last time I had a dream of him was a very, very life-changing, important day for me as well. So it just gave me like all these good, positive feelings of today and the start of this new chapter in my life. So first, I'm going to share with you guys the dream that I had a couple years ago, a year and a half or some change ago. So as you may or may not know, I left my marriage because my husband was unfaithful. He had an affair and I was unhappy as could be. And I finally got the courage to leave him after my father's passing. Once I gathered myself, I had the courage to leave. And I had a dream once he left, the day that he left my home and I slept home by myself. I dreamt my dad at my warehouse and he was waiting for me in the car and I was taking forever. So when I finally got in the car, he's like, "Oh, finally, taking forever." And I was like, "Damn, chill." And I just looked over at him and I said, "But guess what?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "I finally left him." And then he looked at me and he said, "Pues finally," saying like, "Well, finally" in Spanish. And we started laughing. And the rest of the dream was us laughing like hysterically. We're cracking up in the car. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I've never dreamt him ever since. And I feel like that was such an important dream for me because it made me feel like he knew that I finally chose myself and he was there for that moment, or God allowed him to show up for that moment. I'm not somebody that remembers dreams. I'm not somebody that can recall what I dreamt the night before. They say that when you're in deep sleep, you dream. And maybe I do because I do sleep pretty deeply. I sleep very peacefully, but I don't ever remember the dreams. So it's crazy when I do remember a dream. And it was one with my father. I never dream him. My sister dreams him quite often. My mom dreams him from time to time. I don't know if my brother has any dreams of him, but I never do. Like, it's like I never got to see him in a dream. And last night I did. Nobody was home. My kids are at dad's house. It's his week. My mom is on vacation in Mexico. And I was just home alone. Just me and my dog. And my best friend made me a blanket with my father's pictures all over it. And I decided to grab that blanket last night. I grabbed it. I covered myself with his face inward, like facing my body. And the last thing I thought to myself, or I said to God, was I put my phone down and I said, "If you can let him visit me, like, let me see him. Like, I would like to see him." I wasn't sad. I wasn't like overly thinking about him or anything like that. I don't know what in me just felt that. And I said, "Okay, that's it." And I went to bed. And it was funny because he was on his way back from Mexico. So he had just got back from Mexico. He was with his brother. And then my brother and my sister were there. My mom was there and my middle child, Ace. And I could see myself in the dream looking at him. Like, I can't believe I'm looking at him. Like, I can't believe I'm looking at him. Like, it was like unreal to me that he was there. And he was like so happy. He was like happy, like smiling. and he was unwrapping things from his like socks, his underwear, and he was taking out like all these cool things. I don't remember what they were, but they were like precious, like these cool things. And he was showing my son, like, look how awesome this is. And it was like shiny and beautiful. He's like, isn't it beautiful? And he's like showing my son, but I'm staring at him in disbelief that he's there because I know that he's passed. It's like in my dream, I knew that he's passed on. And he's showing my son Ace, and my son Ace is like, how cool, grandpa, like, and all this stuff. My brother and my sister off to the side. My mom's behind me. And I'm just staring at him, and he looks at me like with the stuff in his hands. And it just made me feel like, it gave me like a good feeling about today and a good feeling about like what's to come. I've been thinking about it all day and what it meant or what the dream meant to me. And like him pulling out all these new and beautiful things just made me feel like a new chapter, like a new beginning. Like this is really the start of the new phase in my life. Like that's what it made me feel like, especially when I thought about it and I thought about it like, what is it? Why was it so cool for him to take out all these things? And then in my dream, I just was quiet, and then I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't suppress the feeling or the urge anymore, that I just like grabbed whatever was in his hand and I threw it to the side and I just hugged him. And I felt his entire body, like how his body actually felt. And it had been a long time since I felt that feeling, obviously, since he was alive. It literally felt like his bone structure, his body, the way that he felt when I hugged him. And I just kept repeating, I love you and I've missed you so much. And I just kept repeating that until I woke up. And it's like, and he repeated it back to me. He repeated it back to me, and he was crying. And he said that he missed me so much too, and that he loved me too. But I feel like in the dream also, like he knew it was just temporary, just as much as I knew that it was temporary. And I was just so thankful to God in the morning that I had that. And I've been emotional about it the entire day before coming to filming, because I was just trying to decipher, like, damn, this must really be a big day, because the last time I dreamt him was when I finally made the decision to choose myself. So that's a little story to break the ice with you guys. I think I will get started with the script because I don't want to miss a thing. So you guys get to know me and get to know everything that led me to here. So, just kidding. Well, welcome to the very first episode of the Take a Sip podcast, episode 1. Legitimately, this is episode 1. I am the first guest, the first star of the show. I am so excited to be here. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and watch on YouTube every Thursday, 7 a.m. California time, because I'm a Cali girl. So California time, 7 a.m. You can catch us here every Thursday. In the very first season, we filmed a total of 8 episodes. So that's the first season. I'm trying to figure out what guests to have on the next season, and we're trying to figure out what route we want to take. So we're going to see how this season plays out and then take it from there. I was sitting reflecting about all the roads that led me to here, and I truly can't believe that we're finally here. I fell into the it has to be perfect trap, but how could I define what perfect meant for my podcast if I didn't actually start? There's no way I would know what I needed to change or adjust to make it that much better. So finally, with the help of my incredible assistant, Sophia, who's behind the camera, we made this happen. Actually, she made this happen. I just show up, I film. Everything else you see done, it's Sophia. I am finally here to share more about my perspectives and my life experiences. I'm excited to sit with you guys every week and talk about a range of real life things and be as raw and open and vulnerable as humanly possible. My goal is to give representation to the voiceless and to serve a community of women with my testimony that we do survive, and what's on the other side is better than we could ever fathom or imagine. I remember when I was going through some of the darkest times of my life, it was very much in silence, and I was desperate to find people on the internet that were talking about the things that I was going through, and that they had been through it and that they had made it to the other side. Like, I was desperate because I needed somebody to relate to. I needed somebody that was going through what I was going through so that I didn't feel so alone, because I was so alone. There was nobody that I trusted enough to actually talk about things. So that's what I'm here to do. If you don't know me, my name is Jackie. Hello, Jackie. Again, introducing myself, and I want to start this podcast sharing with you guys a little bit about the roads that led me to here, and I guess you can say what makes me qualified to give you my perspective. I say qualified because qualified. I just want to share my life in general so that you guys kind of get a better overall view of me and where my perspectives and my viewpoints come from. So let's take it back to the 90s, girl. I was born in 89, but let's take it back to the 90s. I was born to the greatest parents in the entire universe. I'm sure a lot of people would say that about their parents. They did the very best they could for my siblings and I with the resources and experiences they had. And for them, I am eternally grateful. They are the reason that I have the opportunities that I do, and I owe everything to my parents. So shout out to my mom and to my dad. When I was around 11 years old, my parents filed for divorce, and that would obviously change the trajectory of my life and my views on relationships. And it was the beginning of me becoming the very first version of myself. I grew up watching my mom do it all, literally do it all. She had us involved in extracurricular activities while managing our home and working full time. She never stopped to breathe and sacrificed a lot of her own aspirations to raise us. My dad was a cross-country truck driver, so he was never really around. But when he was in town, his entire existence revolved around us. So he was like always traveling across the country. So he was only in town like every weekend, every other weekend maybe or so. Or sometimes every 3 weeks for a couple days. I grew up with my mom being both disciplinary as well as a nurturer. And I believe that this is where my hyper independence came from. I saw my dad as a fun parent who always rewarded us with money. And I believe that is where my desire to impress a man came from. Because I was always trying to impress my dad so I can get the so-called prize, which would be his love in the way that he knew how to show it, which was giving us everything we wanted materialistically. Since he was absent most of the time, his way of showing us love was rewarding us with gifts for good behavior, good grades, etc. It's really crazy to look back and understand how our experiences in early childhood shape who we are as people later in life. As I stated earlier, I became hyper independent because that's how I saw my mom. And I never learned to ask for help because I felt I could do it all, because I saw my mom do it all. I didn't need anyone, or at least that was my attitude, because my mom never really needed anyone, or at least she made it seem that way. I learned to heavily rely on myself to a fault, and that later manifested into one of my biggest mistakes in relationships. I also felt deeply seated insecurities when I didn't receive validation from the opposite sex, because that is how my dad loved me and showed me love. So I always did too much for the approval. What you would now call pick-me-sha. That type of vibe is how I was, because I was constantly seeking that form of love and approval from my dad. Never understanding that the deepest form of love I needed was the one I had for myself. But of course, I didn't know any better. And I was barely trying to figure myself out. Being in your teenage years and getting into your 20s and trying to figure all that out is a messy. I don't think that's not a fun time. You couldn't pay me to go back, actually. I love my 30s. But life had to happen to me for me to learn better and for me to be able to sit here in front of you. I was an overachiever, again, seeking approval. Fast forward through high school and the target of a lot of mean girl activities because my mom was so strict. I couldn't shave my legs or wear lip gloss until I was 15, you guys. Is that insane or what? Nor did I have any privileges that a lot of my peers had. And that all took a mental toll on me. And I became a target for a lot of bullying in high school and a lot of mean girlfriends that are your friend but aren't really your friend. And they talk about you behind your back. And I feel like everybody does that in general in high school. But I feel like I experienced that a lot. And it took a huge blow to my self-esteem. And I struggled a lot with that. And I mean, now I'm sitting on this couch and I know for sure all the mean girls are watching. Thank you guys. Because without you guys, I wouldn't have had that experience and been a better person myself and never treated people like that. But despite all that, deep down inside, I always knew I was different and I was destined for great things, regardless of what mental things I was going through or how mean people were because of what was on the exterior or what I wasn't allowed to do or the huge limits that my mom put on me. My mom was so strict because she never wanted to fail as a parent because my parents were divorced and she never wanted to answer to my dad like why I messed up. So I couldn't mess up. I couldn't make any mistakes. I had to be a poster child for her image and it was a lot of pressure. But I ended up enlisting. I moved out actually before I enlisted. I moved out of my mom's house. My mom helped me a lot though. I got an apartment with my dad. My mom helped me a lot and I moved out when I was 17, right before my senior year ended. And I was working at Century 21 and I had a friend who wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps and he asked me if I could go with him. And that's how the next chapter started. So I ended up enlisting in the United States Marine Corps in 2007. I was just a little spring chicken with a hyper independent attitude. And while I was at the recruiting station, someone told me I couldn't do it. And I signed up just to prove them wrong. Literally, just to prove them wrong. Turns out now, though, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. It was one of the best decisions I could have ever made. It was literally, it still to this day pays off. The sacrifices pay off. It has afforded me a lot of opportunities and it allowed me to see life from a different lens. I had the opportunity to live on the East Coast. So I've traveled all over the East Coast and even overseas in Japan. So I lived on mainland Japan and I also lived on an island in Japan. The experience was one for the books. It's also one I wish I would have appreciated so much more. But being so young, I couldn't see all of the value in the opportunity. I was desperate to return home and return to my life. I wish I would have enjoyed that time more, but it's so hard to appreciate life and the beauty in life when you're so young and immature and you don't really have an understanding of what life is. It's just difficult even to explain it to somebody at that age right now, to tell them like, hey, enjoy every moment, soak it all in. They'll be like, yeah, be quiet. You know, that was me too. So don't worry. I returned home and returned to a relationship and a marriage that I should not have been in the first place. But I was so eager to remain in something for the image, to say we made it, to say he chose me. Very pick-me-sha, very rooted in what validation I needed from men, and very I want to win, be the one that wins the man or whatever. Fail. Very pick-me-sha. I never want to say I regret any of it because I don't. I don't have any regrets. I feel like my life played out exactly the way it was supposed to so that I could get to this place. Without those experiences, I wouldn't be here to share with you all everything I have shared across all of my platforms. My pain wasn't in vain. My experiences weren't in vain, and they have served and will continue to serve, and I will continue to be a vessel, and I'm okay with that. Being that my marriage had no real basis or foundation, you can imagine most of our struggles were in immaturity, lack of self-awareness, and my hyper-independence. And obviously the things that were in himself, but I'm not here to speak on him or whatever things he had going on with himself. I'm just here to speak on myself. When you combine all of that and the evolution of becoming different versions of yourself and growing and also starting a family, it causes a tremendous amount of friction. Something that a rocky foundation could not sustain. So this is why I preach on my TikTok to young girls like, hey, I know you think he's your forever, but he's not your forever. And a lot of the young girls get real defensive, but I love it when the older women comment. They're like, she's right. She's right. It's very rare that you find somebody that started off in high school or very young that survived past this tumultuous state, these tumultuous stages, because you're evolving as a person and you're changing and you don't really know who you are till your late 20s. And when you really figure out who you are, some of the people that are from your past don't really align later. So in order for me to have an escape or feel valuable, I had to do something for myself. And that's how I started my business, with very little to no support from my partner at the time. I made it happen for myself though. My business was my saving grace in a time where I didn't feel fulfilled in my relationship. And I was also in school and I earned a bachelor's degree in business. I was a busy body. I started my business in the fashion industry. First, I started from business to consumer, so B2C, which was the boutique. And then I created an extension of that, which was business to business, a wholesale side of the business. I was in the fashion industry for a decade. So crazy times. I did a lot. Pat on the back. Over time, though, that created a bigger wedge in the marriage. And even though it created a bigger wedge, I also needed something more. I had become a mom and I felt so lost. I was going through postpartum and I felt like this just couldn't be my final defining moment. How was it that I was just a mom? Like, what about me? That was really hard for me to understand. I was only 23, and that combined with the fact that I was with someone who considered postpartum feelings or any pregnancy feelings or postpartum feelings to be a cop out. I was struggling hard mentally. And my business and going to school and doing those things for myself were literally my saving grace. So regardless if it created a bigger wedge in my relationship, I needed that for myself because I needed to know that I was more than just a mom, that I was more than just a wife. I didn't just want to be that. I never wanted to be that. I actually didn't even want to have kids till I was 30. So being that I had a kid so young, it literally flipped my whole world upside down. I shut out a lot of my family and friends because everyone knew I was in something that wasn't for me. And I didn't want to hear anyone's opinions, but I still remained. I didn't love myself. I didn't know myself. I didn't know any better. I didn't have the tools to be better. And I was just stuck. So you fast forward 2 more kids and increasing tensions. And until one fateful day in 2019, my oldest son confessed to me what he's seen on his dad's phone. And that became the beginning of the end of a broken me and an entire era of my life. That was the beginning of the end. My husband at the time had an affair and it went through every imaginable emotion: anger, sadness, resentment, humiliation, low self-esteem, and the list goes on. I tried to save something I didn't destroy almost forcibly, like I was forcing him and forcing myself. I tried to prove to myself that I needed this, even though deep down I knew the relationship did not align with God's plan for my life. I cried a lot for 2 years, and I was also very angry. A lot of my anger bled over into my kids, the most innocent people of all. And I realized that had to change, so I sought out help. I started going to therapy alongside church, and I started working on healing. I expected numerous apologies at first, only to realize the only real numerous apologies I needed were the ones I had to give myself. Talk about a tough pill to swallow. Fast forward to I'm healing, I'm establishing boundaries, I'm trying to figure this all out, and then life hits me with the biggest blow of all. January 11th, 2021, my dad goes to heaven unexpectedly. My entire world was turned upside down. I spent a lot of time really drunk and crying. It was, to this day, the most painful thing I have ever had to go through. And unless I lose one of my kids, I don't think I'll ever have to encounter something as painful as losing my father or my mother or my brother or my sister. Like nothing, or my kids, like I feel like nothing has the power to hurt me as much as that hurt. And it gave me an inexplainable resilience and strength. His death forever changed me and how I move and who I am as a person. He saved me when he departed. It was death that gave me the strength to let go of my marriage and to choose myself. And I've never looked back since. And I'm so thankful for everything my father has done for me in life and in death. Since his passing, my life has gotten more beautiful every day. And that's not because of his absence, but just because of everything that came after. I live more, I love more, and I show up as myself genuinely and authentically in everything that I do. I feel so free to be me, and I feel the power in my voice and my testimony. I'm currently still in the midst of a divorce, and it's not fun, and it's kind of ugly, but I have closed almost the entire book of what my life was for an entire decade. The marriage, the business, and the person that I was in that decade. I'm in a new era and I love it here. I'm dating freely. I am traveling. I'm doing cool things with my kids. I'm spending quality time with people I love. I am present and I've never felt more alive. I just want to share with you guys that you do survive. that there is light at the end of the tunnel, corazón, and just be patient. Just be patient with your healing process, with your journey, with all of it. I allowed myself to feel every emotion, but I kept moving forward. And I learned to accept the things that I couldn't change. And I learned to let go of control. Literally, Jesus, take the wheel. Because when you try to force things and you try to control things, the outcome is never pretty because it never goes your way. Instead, just let things go and let them be what they are and keep moving forward. Everything I have and everything I am is because of God's grace. And I'm so glad that this day has finally come. Welcome to the Take a Sip podcast, where no topic is off limits and we're just going to run with it. Sometimes you will just need some coffee, sometimes a little tea, because we got tea. And in extreme cases, a shot, because things just got real. Thank you so much for the opportunity of your time. I am eternally grateful for your listen. See you on next week's episode. But until then, take a sip. Chef's kiss.